Welcome to the Woodridge Baptist Church podcast. For more information about what's happening in the life of our church, visit our website at www.woodridge.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Hey friends, we've been, over these last several weeks, looking at what it really means to share Jesus with people, to be bold and confident in your faith, and to understand that God has put you in places with people all around you that just need to see the love of Jesus in you, and they need to hear the love of Jesus for them. I'm going to invite you this morning to turn to 1 Peter chapter 2. We're going to look at verses 11 and 12, so I'll have you go there. And while you're going there, I was thinking this week, some years ago when I was a doctoral student at A&M, I remember going to lunch with one of my professors, and we had been having a number of conversations about a lot of things. The doctoral seminar was in semantics, and so don't worry about that. But there were other conversations that had really started to crop up outside of class. And so as he and I were at lunch together, I just asked him a question. I said, would you say that you're a person that believes in God? And remember, this is Department of Philosophy, so you don't answer questions. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But he did answer my question with a question. And he said, well, let me ask you a question. Would you say that by looking at me that you think I believe in God? Now, I see what he did there, right? Because what he was really getting at was something like this. Suppose that I say I believe in God, but you're on the outside looking at me and going, I would have never guessed that just by looking at you. He said, well, we would have a little bit of a problem then, wouldn't we? Because what is evident, or literally on the outside of my life, is not a visible representation of what I'm saying is a deep-seated belief on the inside of my life. He said, I would rather think we have a problem, wouldn't we? And I agree with him. We would have a problem. When you think about what it means to bear witness to Jesus, it's a couple of things. One is just how you speak about Jesus, obviously. But the other thing is just the quality and the witness of your life to people that are around you. A friend of mine is a historian, a professor of Christian history. His name's Rex Butler. And he tells this story of Perpetua. Perpetua was born in 182 AD to a wealthy family. She became a Christ follower. After getting married and having her first child, there was a Roman emperor named Septimius Severus. And that to me sounds like a character in Harry Potter. But it's not. This is a real person, Septimius Severus. And he made conversion to Christianity illegal across the empire. And there was a genocide against Christians that broke out. Perpetua was arrested. Some historians think that she was particularly targeted because maybe her family was a family of wealth and means, and so they would be good to make an example out of. Some wonder. But she was definitely arrested, thrown into jail. And it was said all she had to do to get out was to recant her faith in Jesus. It's like, that's all you have to do, is you have to stop saying Jesus is Lord. You need to say that the Caesar is Lord, and then we're going to be fine. Now think about this kind of pressure. So you already have a social pressure because you have literally legal things going against you. But it wasn't just that. Because her father would come to visit her and say, please just deny the name of Jesus, and this will all be over. You need to be thinking about your husband. You're newly married. You need to be thinking about your baby. Are you not thinking about any of these realities in your life? And historians have said that what you could hear from Perpetua in these moments is that she would just say over and over and over again, but I'm a Christian. But I'm a Christian. And she would just keep saying it. Well, as Rex Butler points out, she had a vision one night of a ladder that was reaching to heaven with a dragon that was guarding the base of the ladder. She sees, when she gets to the top, she sees a shepherd that is surrounded by just thousands and thousands and thousands of people. They were dressed in white. It was a beautiful garden. And then when they saw her, they said, welcome. Welcome. Now, as is reported, when she kind of broke out of the vision that she was having, what she knew was she was going to die. But as they said, she just had a tremendous peace. Everything's going to be fine. So here's what happened to Perpetua. she and her companions were sent to the public amphitheater in Carthage to be killed for maintaining their Christian faith. Now, initially, what happened when they threw them into the amphitheater is they released wild animals on them, and they attacked. Perpetua actually lived through the initial attack of the animals, but they weren't going to let her live. So they handed her over to a gladiator to have her head chopped off. When they presented her to the gladiator, who apparently was somewhat young and was shaking because of what was in front of him to do, it said that what Perpetua did was she grabbed his sword and she put it to her throat. And then she was killed. Her final words were, "Stand fast in the faith and love one another, all of you, and be not offended at my sufferings." This, I think, is a perfect example of what it means to have a life that bears witness. What do you think? I mean, just an uncompromising commitment to Jesus first. I think that's a great story. But it really gets me thinking, I mean, why in the world would somebody want to torture Christians? When you think about the early church, you think about what the early Christians, for the first hundreds of years, like no historian is debating what the early Christians were about. They weren't about war. They were trying to not have war. They were against armed revolutions. They weren't trying to upend the Roman government. They paid their taxes. I mean, that part I don't like, but whatever, right? They paid their taxes. They were the first to create a support net for the poor. The early Christians were the ones that started hospitals. You're like, these seem like good folk. So why in the world are we going to be targeting them? I have some thoughts. Historians have some thoughts too. Here's one. When people would come out of, for example, like the worship of Caesar or some of the other Roman gods, and they would worship Jesus, they stopped going to the temples that they used to go to. And you go, well, that kind of makes sense, and it does make sense, except there was a cultural difference. So nowadays, we come to church, this place is about Jesus, right? But back then, you would go into a temple, for example, and maybe you wanted to cut a business deal with someone. Well, the temple is a great place to do it. You could meet up in the temple. You could start to do your business with each other. And then what you could do is, since you're in the temple, you can make an appeal to one of the gods to give a blessing to the deal that you just agreed to in the temple in their presence. Maybe even burn a little bit of incense for them. So it wasn't just religion in practice. What it was religion and business in practice. Are y'all tracking me so far? Now imagine that you're a Christian and you stop going to the temples. There's no business deals going on anymore. There's an economic impact to this. And as you know, people don't like negative economic impacts, right? But that's part of it. The early Christians wouldn't go into the amphitheaters where they knew that people would be thrown to animals and literally just ripped apart while the crowd, almost like Gladiator, for those of you that think of the movie, right? While the crowd is out there cheering for people to be absolutely slaughtered, the Christians are like, we're not going into this place. And part of the reason for that is because they believed in the inherent dignity and value and beauty of a human life. And there are just some associations that won't work when Jesus is really the center of your life. The early Christians held that marriage was a covenant between a man and a woman. If you look at the sexual practices in Rome, it was kind of all over the place. But that made them stand out. In other words, what they did was noticeable. And it didn't go over very well. Cornelius Tacitus, he's a historian, he said, everything that we hold sacred, they, meaning the Christians, they scorned it. And everything we regard as taboo, they permit. In other words, they're literally the opposite of us on everything. Literally the opposite of us. And it brings something to bear, I think, this morning. An authentic Christian life displays a picture of what is good and true and beautiful. But here's the thing. That when you put your life on display for the glory of God, it compels other people to rethink their life and change, which often isn't met favorably. It's just not met favorably. Here's what one Oxford historian said. He said, within the first few hundred years of Christianity, it's estimated more than 1 million Christians were tortured, fed to wild animals, and martyred, among other things. Can you imagine what it would be like to be a Christian in that kind of an environment? Would you agree with me that the challenge is very real to maintain an authentic, living witness of Jesus and knowing probably what's coming on the other side of it because of it? And yet the church grew not in spite of the persecution, but because of the persecution. This was some years ago, I was talking with a pastor from China, and he was pastoring an underground church, which of course it was underground, right? And he was talking with a group of Christian leaders, and one of the things that he said that really just struck me was, he said, listen, I'm asking you, don't pray for the persecution to stop. Don't pray for that. He said, Christianity is exploding in China. It's exploding. He said, pray that the persecution would bring fruit. Pray that the persecution would continue to bring people to Jesus. Because they see what the options are out there and they see something that Jesus can give them. Pray that God would do that. And if the persecution is the way that it happens, so be it. So be it. Same back then. Same kinds of things are happening now. Tertullian, he said the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. And when you think about Tertullian, he was from Carthage. You've already heard about Carthage today. That was the place where Perpetua was killed. But it gives me this question. Why would you join a movement when you know that's what's going to happen to you? I mean, that's gutsy, wouldn't you agree? I'm going to team up with the Christians. It's like when Paul converts to Judaism, to Christianity. He knew what it was meant to switch teams. He knew what it meant because he was the guy that set up the murders of the Christians before. He knew that this was the life that was in front of him. And you go, why in the world would you switch when you know that that is what's on the other side of it? In essence, they're choosing death with Jesus over life with Rome. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? And even if you think about it now, the killing of Christians is still happening. And the most persecuted people group in the world, estimates of 150,000 killed every year. And only recently in the news, for those of you that pay attention to the news, only recently in the news are you starting to hear people make, a plea that somebody, somewhere would stand up and say, this has to stop. Like, this isn't okay. There is something about an authentic and devoted following of Jesus that this just kind of comes with it. And with that in mind, I just want to look at 2 verses in 1 Peter 2, and let's see what God wants to show us today. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11, Peter says, dear friends, I urge you. By the way, do you notice that's just encouragement? I'm urging you here. I'm pushing you here. I urge you as strangers and exiles to abstain from sinful desires that wage war against the soul. I'm urging you. When Peter wrote this, just so you know, the Christians were undergoing what was called the Neronian persecution. In other words, they were being persecuted by Emperor Nero. Now, Nero, he crucified thousands of Christians simply because they were Christians. Historians have pointed out that he would literally, string them to a pole, dip them in pitch, and light them on fire to light the streets with their burning bodies. He was also known for throwing them to wild animals. Not a great guy, is all I'm saying. Now, imagine that you are a Christian and you're living in that context. You can start to understand why Peter says this. You're a stranger in this place. You're not welcome in this place. There is something about 2 worlds colliding, and it's the Christian world and the rest of the world, but the worlds are absolutely colliding. And it brings us to bear this important point. Our primary home is the kingdom of God, not this world we're in right now. Now, that's our primary home. And that's why Peter goes on to say, and pay attention to it, he says, conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles, so that when they slander you as evildoers, they will observe your good works, and they will glorify God on the day that he visits. Your conduct. So here we've been in this series on sharing Jesus. The main thing that we've been focusing on is just a few things. The importance of being welcoming and hospitable. of having meaningful, thoughtful, and helpful conversations with people that don't know Jesus about Jesus. But our conduct is also a part of the story. We're a living witness of the change that Jesus can bring to our life. Did you notice this when he says, conduct yourselves honorably? In other words, what he's saying is to live a beautiful life among people. I think that there can be a word of caution here. When you look, how many of you agree with me this? The world is a bit of a hot mess, all right? That might be the understatement of the morning, but whatever, roll with it, right? It's a hot mess. And instead, what you can find is Christians saying, I don't want to be out there. It's a hot mess. It's not safe out there. People don't value the things that I value out there. Well, Peter just agreed with you. Of course not. And there can be this impetus, if we're not careful, to say, so I'm going to create my own world. I'm going to go into a bubble where it's safe. I can practice my faith among like-minded people, and I'll let the world be the world. That's all well and good unless you take Jesus seriously. Or unless you take Peter seriously. We're to live among them. I mean, notice even back then, they will slander you. The early Christians were called people of incestuous relationships. And the reason that they were called that is because they would, just as a reference, they would talk to each other as brother and sister. Not literally brothers and sisters, brother and sister. You're incestuous. They were called cannibals because when they would take communion, they would talk about the eating of the flesh and the drinking of the blood, literally just the bread and the cup, right? But it's like, oh, you're cannibals. And they would find these as ways to justify the persecution of a, quote, evil people group. Now it's not any different. It's just kind of a different application. For example, you're probably going to get called a bigot. I mean, if what you do is you hold to a traditional view of sexuality and marriage, there's a name attached to it. Or, how about this one? This one is popular, and I still can't quite figure out what they mean by it. You're going to be on the wrong side of history. You're going to be on the wrong side of history. Well, there's definitely more than one side of history. I get that. I just want to be on God's side. That's really it. But it's a way of coming up against and pushing up against what Christians believe and practice. Same back then, same today. But there's a difference. This is something that Peter was trying to say. Yeah, you're being persecuted. Nero is atrocious. I know that tomorrow is not certain for you. And yes, I understand that you might die tonight. I know they might come pull you out of your home. I know it. I get it. But conduct yourselves in a way that's honorable and shows them something about God. Conduct yourselves that way. It reminds me of something that even Jesus said in Matthew 5:14-16. He says, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. And in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Let them see it. I'll be honest with you. A lot of the people that I have been blessed to have good, meaningful conversations with Jesus about, I felt like I had to earn the right to say some things first. Do you understand what I mean? I wanted them to see that I really believe what I believe. I genuinely and authentically live what I say that I believe. Just like my professor before asking the question, right? Would you say that I believe in God? I don't want there to be this split between what I'm saying and how I'm living. I want those things to be in touch with each other. I want them to see the connection. I want them to see the authenticity. Granted, I'm kind of a mixed bag, but that's what I'm aiming for. And sometimes I think I need to earn the right just to say some things to people. I want them to see a light shine, is all I'm saying. When you think about it, both Peter and Jesus were facing death in their life. Jesus faced death. Peter faced death. There was no despair. There was no fear. They just said, in the midst of all the mess, we're going to live the kingdom of God for other people to see it. And we're going to invite them in. We're going to invite them in. Here's an interesting truth. The church that Peter was writing to often met in secret. And it's because they had to. Part of the reason, one historian said, is visitors might be from the magistrate. And then they would go back and report where the Christians were meeting. And then they would come to the home and slaughter everybody that was meeting and worshiping there. And so the Christians had to come up with another way of fully living and embodying their life, all the while proclaiming a message of Jesus Christ. So they're meeting in catacombs. They're meeting in secret homes. And so a lot of times non-Christians didn't come to a worship service or even be drawn by that. Instead, what they did was they looked at the public, not the private life of the Christian. They looked at them when they were out there. Just what did they look like on a Monday? What did they look like on a Tuesday? And this is what one historian said. The way they treated each other in marriage. The way that women were valued in the Christian community. Their different views on human sexuality. How they loved and treated their children. How they cared for their neighbors. And the kindness of their speech. They were just different. They were just different. As one person said, people were drawn to their goodness. They're just drawn to it. In the New Testament, just so you know, this word used here is a witness, which can mean something like this. Someone who sees or experiences something very important. It's like when you see it, you go, something very important is happening here. But there's another meaning to this word. It's where we get the word martus. It's where we get the word martyr. In the first century, it often literally, as you've probably already figured out, it often meant, no, you're literally going to die for this. By the way, it's still happening today. I don't know that you're worried about that here, like in this room so much. Still happening today. But in our context, it might mean a death of another kind. I mean, think about this. Death to other people's moral view of you. Like you're just so beholden to what people think about you that you become a moral chameleon just so you don't have to deal with the way they feel about you. That might have to die. Or death to relationships. Some of that is because the relationships, honestly, are pulling you further away from God than closer to God. That's one thing. But honestly, people just walking away from you because you take your faith in Jesus seriously. That might be another kind of death. I've watched people have career death almost because the situations that they get put in simply will not align with the values that they have in Jesus. And it's like, I can stay in the company and I can compromise all the time, or I can follow Jesus, but I can't do both. What do I do? And you're sitting there feeling real tension there, especially if you're like got a wife and you've got children. You're like, we do need to eat. You see what I'm saying? There's death to all kinds of things when we authentically, devotedly follow Jesus. But this is what happens when we follow Jesus. This is the thing. You become what you were created to be. You become what you were created to be. There's not all this brokenness in your life anymore. There's not all this fragmentation in your life anymore. He puts things back together. I want to be fair with you. In some ways, I've made the joke. If I take Jesus very seriously, he was pretty good about putting a line in the sand. He was. I want you to think about this in John chapter 6. Really cool moment. I would have loved to have been there to witness this. In John chapter 6, Jesus feeds the 5,000. You know, when he feeds the 5,000, it's probably 5,000 men. There was probably more people than that. But, you know, it's better than food truck day that we're going to have in a couple of weeks is all I'm saying. I would have loved to have been there. Now, what happens is he feeds the 5,000. He crosses over the water. He goes into a new region. Now, the people behind had kind of gotten word. They're like, ooh, wait, you know, he's over there. Maybe we can like meet up with him again. And so a crowd is like waiting for him when he shows up. However, when he gets over to the other side, he does something a little bit different. It wasn't snack day anymore. Instead, he looks at a crowd and he says this, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you can't be a follower of mine. Now, how many of you would say, all right, that's a line in the sand kind of moment? What I don't see is Jesus kind of mixing his words there. And the other thing that I think is really interesting about Jesus is his response. Because when he says it, the crowd's like, I'm out. And they turn and they walk away. And Jesus' response is this: he lets them. He let them go. Now think about that. There wasn't this time where what Jesus did was this: no, come back. All right, I get it. That was a little harsh. Let me say something different. Never did it. He drew the line, and he said, who's with me and who's against me? He drew the line. I think that there's a lot to take from this, but the reason I give this example is I don't want to manipulate you into what it means to really follow Jesus. There's a cost involved. There's a cost involved. I mean, even if you look at 1 Corinthians 6, Paul says, you've been bought with a price. Your life isn't even your own. It's not even your own. You gave up your rights to a lot of things when you came to Jesus, and there is a cost involved. Who's with me? Who's against me? Who's with me? Who's against me? This is what Jesus did. So following Jesus is costly. You can't just do what you want. You can't just believe what you want. It's a call to a life done his way. His way. For the early Christians, you've probably already seen this. They often had a choice between loyalty to Rome or loyalty to Jesus, and they often couldn't have both. It wasn't going to work. And for some, I think even Christians were trying to find a way to have a divided loyalty. It won't work. And I also think there's this other pressure that's an allegiance to a cultural narrative. Hey, are you going to be on the right side of history or what? Or are you going to follow Jesus? Lines are getting drawn all the time. And by the way, not just by Jesus. The culture is drawing them too. It's which side of the line are you on? And what we do is we count our cost and we make our decision. And here's what we find. Often what we will not give up that he's expecting us to so that we can really have him. Did you hear what I just said? What we find is what we will not give up that he expects us to so that we can have him. This morning, something I want you to really lock into your mind. Yes, Jesus draws a line, but there's something great on the other side of the line. There's forgiveness, there's healing, there's restoration, there's wholeness again. My friends, there is more grace and forgiveness in Jesus than there is sin in your life. But don't fool yourself, there is sin in your life. But there's more grace in him. This has been his offer. And while, he'll sit there and draw a line in the sand and let the crowd walk away, they could have walked back. They could have walked back. He leaves the choice to you. He leaves the choice to you. How do you respond to him? And I want to give you a chance to this morning. For some, I think there's a challenge in here for Christians. I really do. One is to live authentically means to live without a divided loyalty. You see what I'm saying? To live authentically means that you live without a divided loyalty. Part of what it means to have faith in Jesus is you declare loyalty to him. That's what it means. And he's the master, not me, not you. It's him. We put ourselves at the feet of the master to learn what he says about life. And even at times when we don't understand what he's saying, to do it, to understand it. We put ourselves at the feet of the master. I think maybe some of us need to ask, do we have a divided loyalty today? What is the part of my heart that I just said, that's the place I'm not willing to let Jesus go? Today is a great day to let him go there. He shines the light on it so that we can see it. But for others, I think it's just coming to Jesus like you just never have. And I want you to see his heart for you this morning. Same things I've seen for myself over and over and over again. I have never, ever lost my appreciation for his graciousness to me. Just never. I wake up every day fully aware of who I am and who I'm not yet. I do. But the part of my story that I'm just most thankful for is he continues to work on me. He's never quit on me. His grace is still there for me. It's still there for you. This can be a day of commitment, my friends. This is the word, that if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord, God raised him from the dead, you're saved. You're saved. You're saved from sin. You're saved from death. You're saved from the whole thing that honestly, when we walked away from God, is the life that we walked to. The line was drawn. What I would say is, it's wise to take up the cost. It's wise to take it up. Because on the other side of the line is the creator of the world, the sustainer of the world, the giver of grace, the one that loved you all the way to the cross. That's what's on the other side of the line. Today, he invites you to take it, and I invite you to take it.
We hope you have enjoyed the podcast. For more information about our church, visit www.woodridge.org.